Google launched the Pixel 10 series last week, and we can finally tell you all about Tensor G5. Spoiler alert, it's a mixture of good news and bad news. Meanwhile, Nothing got into some hot water this week when we found out that it was using stock photos and trying to pass them off as one shot with the Nothing Phone 3. Interestingly though, this isn't as bad as it sounds. Finally, the smart ring market here in the US got a lot smaller recently thanks to some good old-fashioned patent infringement.
You're kidding me, right?
I'm C. Scott Brown, and it's time for a quick roundup of the biggest tech news that you need to know about. Tensor G5 is out in the wild and all the embargoes are up, so we can finally tell you all about the newest processor powering the latest Pixel 10 phones. My buddy Robert Triggs has a full breakdown of what you can expect from Tensor in a 2,000-word article filled to the brim with charts and graphs and all that geeky stuff. So if you want to really dive into Tensor G5, check out the link in the description. What I'm going to do here is give you a basic summary in just a few minutes. First, let me start with CPU benchmarks. We were finally able to determine what Google used to create Tensor G5, and it's made up of one big core, 5 medium cores, and 2 little cores, which you can see on screen here. The important takeaway here is that giant big core. That 3.78 gigahertz clock speed is much higher than the 3.1 gigahertz clocks we saw on the big core of the Tensor G4 chip. As one would expect, this, combined with the other new cores, translates directly to significant increases in benchmark performance across both single-core and multi-core tests, although the multi-core numbers are far more impressive than single-core. In other words, any naysayers out there who thought that Tensor G5 wouldn't be a step up over Tensor G4 in benchmarks need to sit back down because the numbers don't lie. In your face, naysayers.
Shut up!
Okay, so I got pretty pumped up right there, but now I need to calm down because now I need to tell you about the GPU scores. I'll sum this up pretty quickly. If you're a gamer, you should probably avoid the Pixel 10 series. What we found in our GPU tests was that Tensor G5 delivers terrific results in the beginning of a session. However, as your gameplay goes on, the GPU softens down to around the same level as Tensor G4. In other words, if you only play games for a few minutes at a time, you'll probably see some gains. But most people play for longer than that. And once you get past the first few minutes of gaming, you're gonna see a drop off in performance. So what about AI and image processing? These are a bit harder to test, but so far we're seeing pretty reliable results from Tensor G5 in these areas. Notably, there are a ton of new features for the Pixel 10 series that run completely on device, such as Magic Q, the Pixel Journal app, and AI upscaling for 100x super res zoom photos. There's a whole lot more info on this at androidauthority.com. So now we know for sure, Tensor G5 is better for your everyday smartphone tasks, but about the same for games when compared to Tensor G4. But the real question many of you have is how does it compare to the big daddy processor at the moment, the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite? Well, you should go read Rob's article for all the juicy details, but I'll say this. Qualcomm has nothing to worry about. Across all tests, the Snapdragon 8 Elite inside the Galaxy S25 Ultra absolutely destroyed Tensor G5. So yeah, the age-old battle between Pixel fans and Samsung fans rages on. Speaking of Pixel versus Samsung, I have a video on my solo channel that talks about that very topic. I'll link it for you up here, but I'll also toss a link in the description to my channel as well as Android Authority's other channels, which include a brand new podcast from my buddy Mishal Rahman. Go check out all that stuff if you haven't before. Our next story is about the Nothing Phone 3, which was the center of some controversy earlier this week. Over in New Zealand, an anonymous source came across a retail demo unit of a Nothing Phone 3. On this demo phone, they saw a video clip that showed 5 different photos that were all purportedly shot on a Nothing phone. However, the anonymous source quickly realized that the photos were just taken from a stock photography site called Stills. We reached out to the 5 photographers and heard back from 2. Both confirmed that the photos on the phone had not been shot with the Nothing Phone 3, or any Nothing phone for that matter. They also confirmed that Nothing had purchased licenses from the stock photography site for the photos in question. Obviously, this heavily suggested that Nothing had purchased these photos, slapped them into a Nothing Phone 3 advertisement, and tried to say, hey, check out these awesome photos shot with our phone. To get to the bottom of this, we reached out to Nothing, and its response was Well, let's just say it wasn't a denial. Accuracy and how we represent our product capabilities is important to us. Phone 3 demo units are being updated to feature only images captured with Phone 3. Yeah, that doesn't tell us much, does it? Well, as it turns out, the official response was super lame, but Nothing's co-founder took to social media sometime later to actually explain what happened. Basically, Nothing says it bought the photos as a placeholder because it needed to have the little demo video completed and approved months before the Nothing Phone 3 would actually launch. Then, through some simple disorganization and miscommunication, the video never got updated with the real photos that actually did come from a Nothing Phone 3. In other words, Nothing's intention wasn't to mislead customers, but it just forgot to refresh its ad with the appropriate photos. The company says it is in the process of rectifying this and also working to determine how the issue happened and how it can be prevented in the future. What's so crazy about all of this is that Nothing phones have pretty good cameras. If Nothing had skipped using stock photos and just given the photographers Nothing phones to shoot with, they probably would have gotten some terrific results. It's strange that Nothing went the stock photography route first instead of doing that. So with this in mind, my suggestion to Nothing is simple. Why not just use photos from the previous generation of phone as the placeholders? That way, if you forget to update things again, the photos on the demo unit were still captured with a Nothing phone, just not the newest one. Just my 2 cents, Carl. Let me know if you need my address to send the check.
Give me $400!
Our final story this week centers on smart rings and a significant shakeup in the market for the United States. Most people watching this have probably heard of Oura rings, as they're the most popular smart ring company in the world with the most successful product in the category. Well, Oura isn't too happy with some of its competitor companies, specifically Ultrahuman and Ringcon. Oura says that these two companies have infringed on its patents and should be blocked from selling their smart rings in the United States. Well, the International Trade Commission agreed with Oura and has issued both Ultrahuman and Ringcon cease and desist orders. This means that by October 21st this year, Ultrahuman and Ringcon must stop selling their smart rings here in the US. After this all went down, Ultrahuman confirmed to Android Authority that it is taking the cease and desist order seriously, but that it will continue to sell its rings in the US until the October 21st deadline. You gotta respect the hustle there. Ultrahuman is like the kid who waits until the very last second to turn in his school project, except that they're doing it so they can make all the money they can before the deadline. We haven't heard from Ringcon yet, but we assume they'll be doing the same thing and also pushing as long as they can until October 21st. This means that if you had any intention of buying these rings and you live in the US, you might want to get on that soon. Interestingly, Samsung wasn't a part of this litigation. Samsung released the Galaxy Ring in 2024, but it must have been able to design it without infringing on any of Oura's patents. Conversely, maybe Oura felt confident about going after Ultrahuman and Ringcon, two relatively small companies, and didn't feel so confident about going after the army of lawyers a company like Samsung has at its disposal. I'm just spitballing here, but who knows what actually happened. Anyway, that's it for this roundup. If you want to dive deeper into these stories, be sure to check out all the links down below. Remember to like and subscribe so you'll be notified as soon as the next roundup goes live. See you all soon.